Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 12 of the anime series SukaSuka. For all intents and purposes, the season finale, probably series finale. And I was actually somewhat caught off guard with just how emotionally impactful this would be as a finale episode. I'm somebody who was really intrigued and captivated at the start of the series with the characterization and the meeting of Willem and Catholi, respectively, and his being ushered into this scenario where it's kind of like an orphanage of all these children, all these little girls who are basically weapons. Their purpose is to be utilized as weapons against these great beasts who had once swallowed up humanity, all this stuff, which all pertained to his own past. We find he'd been frozen for so many years, a la Steve Rogers, Captain America, and it wasn't just through his job placement at that early stage in the series that he would eventually become their protector. He would earn their respect, their admiration, and their trust, and really take on that role, which harkened back to his earlier life, his history, his past, where he had been a sort of father figure amongst other children and everything like that, and he was constantly being reminded of that in his interactivity with these new little fairy children, these weapons. And the romance that would blossom between he and Catholi was really just resounding to me. But even in watching the series unfold and watching this finale episode, I'd largely been under the suspicion that this would be pretty much how it would all culminate. It would culminate heartbreakingly and such like that. Although I beg to offer the argument that there are still hints of things not being entirely closed off by the end necessarily. You basically saw, we finally called back on that precursor element from the very first episode, where it was in fact Catholi who had gone from being blue-haired to red-haired, and I'm kind of wearing this shirt as an homage to that. And she had professed her love for Willem. We didn't know at the time, that was the dynamic that was unfolding there, but the pledge of her love was to fight on to her dying breath, to save everyone and to save her love and everything like that because of the happiness she had been given, gifted by him. And it was a 1-2 punch to the emotional chops. Watching that actually unfold with all the context of the history between them at this point in the series, and to see her take that flying leap off the airship after Willem had done that himself. He spent all that time fighting these creatures alongside the few fairies that were doing it as well, and he saw that Nephren was about to die, and he wouldn't have it. He wanted to save her life as much as he would have wanted to save Catholi's or any of these other children, and so he leaps off the airship after Nephren falls, to her potential demise, and grapples onto her. And of course, we see Catholi coming in at the last second, fully transformed now, given one last chance after hearkening back to the identity of that red-haired persona, that little girl and everything like that. She barters for one last chance to say goodbye, to say how she really feels, and show that to Willem by saving him and such like that. And of course, by the end of the episode, you get the impression that, well, Catholi, Nephren, they've both died. You're not really sure what's happened to Willem, but his friend, the sort of priestly figure, whose name I forget, was actually checking that, bowl of liquid to see if he could tap into any sort of heart signs or life signs. And after he is, ushered out of the room, his attention is called to visitors or something like that. You see ripples in the water that denote, well, in fact, it almost seems to suggest Willem is actually still out there. If not Willem and Nephren both have somehow survived. It's very possible, since we never see any burials, we never see any bodies or anything like that, that it's just assumed they all perished, but they're actually still out there somewhere. At least I'm kind of loosely, crossing my fingers in the hope of that being the possibility, the case. And then, of course, you have this very enigmatic, strange final shot of this finale episode that goes back to Catholi's birth. It actually took reading some comments on my anime list to piece this together, that rather was it, calling back on Cthulhu's being born into this world in that guise, and not her being reborn or anything after her death or anything like that. Which I seem to gather is something that happens in the source material of the manga, that her spirit, or whatever you want to say, is actually reincarnated at some point in another chapter of the manga or something like that. But as someone who really isn't interested in the manga or anything like that, I'll wait to see if they eventually do make a season 2 of this anime. I don't really hold a lot of stock or faith in that happening. I don't know how well received this anime was, but it was emotionally impactful. Calling back on this episode again, with the song you hear in the very first episode, Scarborough Fair. It's the same exact version, and it comes at a very poignant moment when Cthulhu has chosen to stand and fight for one final time. It is gifted that sort of lease for those final moments in that battle to save Willem and to save Nephren and all that kind of stuff. And they're playing it over Willem realizing what she's done, what she's doing as it's happening. He's screaming bloody murder. He wants her to stop. He doesn't want to lose her. After having gone the nth degree with his poor physicality and overpoweredness as well, risking his own life, and he's one to talk, telling, Nephren, don't you do it, and Cthulhu, don't you do it, and all this kind of stuff. They are all honorable characters, and they have this care and concern, deep-seated care and concern for each other, that they will die for each other. And again, you have that bittersweet uncertainty that maybe they've all gone to their deaths in wanting to save each other and give everyone else who survives a new lease on life, at least for a time, that kind of thing. And then I saw some potentially spoilery suggestions that, like, oh, well, Cthulhu did die and Nephren did die, and you don't want to know what happened to Willem, according to one person. And I don't know if this is just speculation or it's actually something concrete that, is an aspect of the source material, but he might become a beast of his own, and, I don't know, because of that whole revelation that they are all born out of humanity and humans transformed and mutated and evolved and whatever like that. It was highly compelling and intriguing, and but utmost and beyond all else, the thing that really struck me and stuck with me throughout the course of the series that kept me engaged was the characterization and the interpersonal dynamics, the interplay between Willem and Cthulhu and these other characters, and just how meaningful they all grew to be to each other, and then ultimately being willing and arguably so having gone ahead and fully sacrificed themselves for each other. It's just a real, like I said, it's like a kick to the emotional chops, and I was misty-eyed, hearing Scarborough Fair, hearing it all, as this was all culminating visually so. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect it to have such an emotional weight as it did to me. And so, I don't really know if they are going to have a follow-up season or anything like that in the future. I would not spurn one away. I don't necessarily feel like I need it, but I feel like the door was open just enough, with a foothold there, that if they want to, if it was well received enough, if it was warranted enough, they could build off where we left off by the end. And because there is that potential for Willem still being alive, for Nephren still being alive. I don't know about Cthulhu, but, and again, it was a little confusing because of that final shot of her having been born so many years ago, which at first I had taken for her being reborn, in a sense. And it didn't sit right with me that. I was kind of like, I'm not sure if that's what that is. And as I say, I read up on my anime list and found out, no, in fact, that was a flashback to Cthulhu's birth. Sort of tipping of the hat that the rest of her life was already marked out ahead of her, and it wasn't all going to be, puppies and rainbows and such like that. It wasn't all going to be happy-go-lucky times and happily ever after and all of that. Tragically and sadly so. But for that, it was bittersweet and emotionally impactful and a surprise. It's a series I'd recommend giving a watch, most definitely. And I wanted to come on and talk about the finale episode because I'd already talked about the series before, as I say, in the first couple episodes or whatever. And yeah, so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you watched this particular anime series, SukaSuka, if you enjoyed it, if you found it as intriguing and compelling as I did, if you thought all the characterization was the standout aspect to it, the emotional weight of their, growing closer and closer, and how much they would come to mean to each other, or any other, perceptions you have on what was good or bad about this particular series. Let me know in the comments below. Love having that conversation. And yeah, otherwise it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. I'll catch you all later. Peace.